Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome both our in-person and virtual audience to track 4, Translating Data into Actionable Insights. Our session for this hour is Enabling Actionable Data Collaboration across New York City Health and Hospital with the teams and their partners. New York City Health and Hospitals is one of the largest healthcare organizations in the United States, servicing over 1 million New Yorkers. The system embarked on a data transformation strategy with a customer-centric and multi-pronged data strategy, enabling actionable insights, especially during the time of pandemic, where New York City was the epicenter of COVID-19. So this session will provide insights on the critical success factors behind their data strategy. Before I introduce the speaker, I would like to share some housekeeping details. This session is being recorded and it will be made available as part of your registration at no extra cost. Our virtual audience, please submit your questions via Hua app, Q&A tab, and in-person audience, please raise your hand and I will bring the microphone to you. Our speaker for this session is Alexander Izaguirre. Hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. Alex is the Chief Data Officer of New York City Health and Hospitals. When he joined the system in 2019, he reimagined their data strategy by introducing new operating models, new service models, and business capabilities to accelerate the data transformation. We all know that data reveals insights. Sometimes it's favorable, sometimes it's not favorable. So data can be your friend or foe. So you need, our companies need a culture of safety. So Alex will discuss how NYC Hospitals enables a culture of safety. With that, Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to present some of what we've done. I do encourage any questions, and to the point made earlier, we like to be challenged. So if you have questions at the end and you want to challenge us, there's a couple of things that are going to come of it. Either we have good answers for you, or we don't have good answers for you, and we learn something from it. So please feel free to challenge anything that you see here. Naturally, it's a limited amount of time to share our story, but I think we're going to try to hit on the highlights to kind of give you a feel for some of what we've gone through, some of our successes, some of our failures that led to our successes. With that said, a little bit about me. I got hired to come to New York City Health and Hospitals under the premise of being in charge of data governance. Now, I'll be told, truth be told, I was a little bit somewhat confused about my role initially. I'm like, exactly what do you want me to do? There's a lot that's encompassing data governance. So I decided to take a different approach to it. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to look at this and work with various stakeholders that I know that can help me, and partners that I've met and learned throughout the years, and come up with a strategy that I think will do the best that we need for New York City Health and Hospitals. And that probably went beyond what it is that a data governance leader would be doing. So I'll tell you a little bit about us. We are the largest public health system in the nation. We service over 1 million patients a year. We have over 70 locations, over 5 boroughs. And of course, you could read the slides and learn more and more about us. But from the respects of my scope, I lead an analytics center of excellence, which is how we provide service to our customers. We have data analytics self-service portal that we created on our own. We've developed a data academy that is the arm of ours that leads data literacy. We have enterprise data governance, which is actually what I was hired for. And then we have enterprise data technology portfolio that we run so that we're providing all the different resources that people are looking for. We own application development. And then finally, we also have the websites, which are the public and intranet sites. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people are wondering, well, what do those have to do with data? So part of our vision was that we have line of business systems that actually aggregate and collect all this data that we're operating through every day. But then there's a lot of data that we don't have. And this strategy ended up working really well for us during the pandemic, because what we found is a lot of the dashboards and reports that people were looking for, we didn't have all the data for. But if we have an application development team that can quickly generate an application to help collect that data, we complete the story. So that's kind of the backdrop on why we did that. With that said, we did end up with some really huge themes during the pandemic, and this is my only slide about the pandemic, I promise you, because I'm sure everybody's heard enough about the pandemic and doesn't want to hear anymore. But we did learn a few things around data sharing. We needed to provide data locally to the state, to the federal agencies, and quickly. You know, and the needs were changing overnight. Like, now we need this. Now we need to know how many beds. Now we need to know how much PPE, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was constantly changing. We needed to rapidly develop applications and data solutions. Today, we were looking at how many patients were coming in to the ICU. Tomorrow, we needed to pull out how many of those patients were children. So there was just a lot of needs that constantly kept evolving. Governance. Once again, when you're looking at all this data and you're trying to understand how it is that you're going to report out on, influenza-like illnesses, is every hospital using the same definition? So we were quickly bringing together subject matter experts to come to a common agreement, publish that, and let people know that this is how we're defining it. Because someone was always going to raise their hand and say, that can't be right. I see it differently in my system. So definitely, huge challenges. But what I am thankful about this whole experience is it taught us to be nimble from a data shop perspective. Instead of sitting there planning out the amazing, field of dreams that everybody will come if we build it, we had to kind of think quickly on our feet, and it really taught us how to balance that long-term vision with the short-term vision. So those are the big backdrops. But here's our key takeaways. One thing that we learned really, like 3 things front and center that really resonated with us is understanding your customer's pain. The more you are aware of your customer's pain, the better you could provide products and services for them. Also, inspiring a culture of safety. If people feel safe, they will work with you. And then the last one, your customer wants products and services, not capabilities. And we're going to go through each of these separately because they all warrant their own vignette. So with that said, after the pandemic, we actually went on a listening tour. We said, hey, we learned so much from this, but what is it that you're going through? Tell us about it. And I spoke to over 300 people. We also had vendors like Gartner to help us look at what it is that we were doing and whether our strategy was resonating with them. We put out an RFP. We ended up landing with, and I'll talk a little more about this, our technology. Main technology stacks are Tableau, Informatica, Snowflake, SAS Viya, ArcGIS. We have a number of different tools that we use, but we'll talk more about those later. But ultimately, in hearing our customers and trying to listen to their pain, I put out a poll, and it basically said most people think that they know what the needs of their customers are, and that they've validated with those customers. And I'm sure that's happened. Because I think most of us kind of do know what our customers need. But it's interesting trying to differentiate the difference between a perceived need versus a perceived pain. And I'll give you a perfect example. In one of our hospitals, I was told, hey, listen, it's really painful for us to report on left without being seen, which is a really important indicator that lets you know how many of your patients are just kind of giving up and saying, I'm going to leave the hospital because I've been waiting too long or something. And every hospital was measuring it differently. They said leaving the hospital when they left the door. And that could have been recorded differently. Did the person at the front desk actually see them leave? Or, hey, it's been a while, where did a person go? I guess they must have left. Another one says, if it's in more than 3 hours, we consider it left without being seen. So I had one of our customers tell us, this is really painful because we're reporting it the right way and others aren't reporting it the right way, and it makes us look bad whenever we're reporting out there. So putting on my engineering hat, I was like, okay, we could set up a governance committee and we could all talk about how it's going to be properly defined and come to an agreement. And then I'm like, wait a second, you're not listening. Alex, you're not listening. And really, that's not listening to pain. That's listening to a problem, but the pain is very different. It's, then I change my thought pattern, I respond back to them. So it must be really frustrating knowing that you're doing your best to report out how you're performing and knowing that someone might think that you're not doing your job well, or that you might lose your job, or that people will perceive you as incompetent, and that's pain. That's the pain that they're having. It's not, they don't care the solution. If I could have told them 17 different ways to solve this problem, but the pain is what they are emotionally tied to. And letting them know that you really understand what their pain is changes the dialogue completely. After I was reflecting that pain back to them, I could have told them anything and they would have been like, let's give it a shot, this guy cares about us. And that's important to do, is connect with them and really understand the pain. And I make that point because that, to me, was the differentiator for us to be able to really get insights in terms of how to build a different type of service delivery model for them. So we aggregated these pain concepts into access to data, trust, alignment, culture, and literacy. And what we found is that we needed to build various different personas so that we can actually talk about what type of customers are we trying to serve. So the first one is the executive sponsor. And if you really understand this persona, their pain is, I got to make decisions quickly, I got all these different things going on, the mayor needs a report, we got to do this, a regulatory agency's coming to town, we need to respond quickly to them. And it was interesting because I would challenge my team on how to provide them services like, well, why won't they fill out the form like everyone else? Because they're executives and their decisions are affecting tens of thousands of people in certain cases, and they need a different service delivery model. We can't just do a one-size-fits-all. So this is our first persona that we came up with. The next persona was the data champion. And this is kind of, brings me back to my old IT days. When I was younger, I was kind of the resident IT person where people were saying, hey, can you fix my printer? This driver's not working. Can you, like, some of us know that. And basically, we have that now for data. There's that, oh, Bill can do mad pivot tables. You got to use Bill. He's great. So everybody is got that person in their office that they can connect with and say, this person can help me solve my data problem. And in many cases, they're overtaxed and they're under-resourced. And what I mean by under-resourced, we're not talking about dollars necessarily. We're saying we don't give them the right access to data. We don't train them in the tools that they could be using. We don't give them all the insights on the governance and the processes that we have. So we wanted to actually really meet the needs of this particular stakeholder. So that's our second persona that we focus efforts around providing support for. And then finally, it's our data citizen. This is your data consumer. This is the one and most important thing I want to say about this stakeholder group is they don't want to know how the sausage is made. They're not interested in that. We love our technology stacks, our capabilities, everything that we did and how we're going to do it, and you got to use this, and this is great. They don't care. They're like, and can I get that report? When can I have it? No matter what you tell them, their concern is that. And they have a lot of anxiety over what you're going to give them, how you're going to give it to them, and whether they understand what you're giving to them. So this is why we took a very, very heavy data literacy approach to trying to support our community.
Right here.
Because part of the story is saying that, we want to provide
Yeah,
great
that's
products
also-
and services. The other part of it is making sure that we make that they are capable of leveraging those products and services. So these are our three different stakeholders. Now, I'm going to caution everybody that's watching this. It's easy to say, hey, Alex, I want those slides. We could use that. Those are great. But this was specifically tuned to the customer base at New York City Health and Hospital. This is not everyone's persona groups. If you're doing this at your stakeholder, I would say, go talk to people, listen to their pain, think about what different personas you would need for your community. For us, this works. And I could probably do it better if, now that I know more. So again, 3 takeaways. Inspire a culture of safety. Now we'll move over to this. This is really, really important. I think people are more likely to disclose defects and mistakes if they know they're not going to get in trouble for it. And this is one thing that I have to tell you, out of all the things that I could say about New York City Health and Hospital, this is what I'm most proudest of. All the way from the top, all the way from Mitch Katz through my boss, Dr. Eric Way, and Kim Mendez and others, we really care about helping people feel empowered, to feel like we want them to grow, and that if they reveal that something's not working, that it's not a reason to be punitive against them. I could tell you right now, this is a major aspect of a successful data and analytics program, because in the absence of this, people hide data. People misinterpret data. I'm going to be kind about the way I say that. And ultimately, you can't really get the most out of your data if people don't want to open up. I always like to use this model. For some of you may know, but I used to work at Gartner, and while I was at Gartner, I was trained on a couple of things in terms of interacting with customers. And one thing that we were trained with is this risk-reward model. The brain is highly effective at quickly identifying, is this a risk situation or a reward situation? And they used to present to us this Terra model that basically said, people look at it in a workplace environment as tribe, expectations, rank, and autonomy. So if you took expectations as an example, the ability to predict the future, your brain might ask, do you make things clear or confusing? And actions that would support the reward would be creating milestones and making things clear and providing some understanding of what's coming up next. Actions that would support risk is firefighting and dealing with plans or lack of planning from that perspective. So this is a really interesting model. It really does help give you a sense of how your culture is. So initially, I thought that we needed to fix our data culture. And then I ended up realizing that it was kind of the opposite. It was more because people felt disenfranchised and they all didn't feel like they were getting access to data and they weren't sure what was being done with the data, we were creating a negative culture. So this has been part of the reason why we've created a multi-tier service model. So from a strategy perspective, just like anybody could be looking at this slide and say, yeah, this makes sense. But I think what we've talked about so far changes the worldview. Data integrity, service delivery, and data literacy was what we were going to focus on. First thing, enabling trust in our data. We wanted to create standards on definitions. We wanted to make sure data is centralized. And then we wanted to make sure that we were constantly validating that the data that's coming in is accurately introduced. And if there was a lack of accuracy, that we can go back to the source and see what we could do to fix that. The next part was service delivery. Again, I think part of the service delivery story here is meet your customer where it's important for them. I think too often we build data capabilities or IT capabilities, but that's not what they want. Like, I'll ask this question, it's rhetorical, of course, but if you were asking for cable service, you'd be saying, I need internet, or I need phone, telephony, or I'm looking for cable like TV or something. You would never say, hey guys, I'm calling about a data engineer. I really would like a cable run from the pole to my house. And while you're at it, can you send someone over that can get me a router? Like you don't ask for those things. Those are the capabilities that a company has to be able to provide you that service. But yet, in many cases, IT and data organizations are offering their customers capabilities, not services. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then finally, data literacy. If your customer base doesn't feel confident understanding how to read run charts or chloropreth maps and all sorts of things, they're not going to be able to engage with those resources that you develop. So we've created a rich library of data assets. We now introducing courses for Epic reporting, Tableau, Snowflake, and other resources that we're making available so that they can learn how to use some of the technologies that we have if they choose to. But that's more for the data champions, and we'll talk to you more about that. So finally, again, your customer wants products and services, not capabilities. And here is kind of the real interesting part of our approach. In every job that I had before this one, I'd look at the capabilities we need, look at what org structure we're going to build, then we're going to figure out how we're going to actually work these capabilities and try to present them and provide them to our customers. And in this situation, we did it completely the opposite way. And I'll tell you why. How do you build an org structure if you don't know what capabilities you need? And how do you introduce capabilities if you don't know how you're going to operate? And how do you know how you're going to operate if you don't have a service delivery team or teams? And how do you build a service delivery team if you don't know what products and services you're offering? And how do you build products and services that you're offering if you actually don't know who your customer is? So this time, we went the other way around. We figured out who our customer was. We built a services portfolio. We developed a service delivery model with different service tiers. And then we created an organizational structure and an operating model that would support that with capabilities, with the right professionals to be able to make that happen. And it's been completely a different approach. So that's what this speaks to. Here's our 3 different customer types. These are the different types of services. And notice that the services that we put here are not technical in nature. These are things that everyday people would ask for from that particular service persona. So executives and their sponsors and people in their offices are looking for dashboards and reports and extracts and models and analytics done on certain data sets and things. KPI development, consultations. Sometimes they just want to talk to us. Hey, how do we do this? Access to different dashboards and reports and break fix. That's it. It's very simple, very easy to, and our website, and if for some of you that want to linger around later, I brought my iPad so I can connect remotely. I could show you how we did that. And it's very, very simple to access and very simple to engage us. And that is all provided through our Analytics Center of Excellence analytic cores. We have 3 of them. A financial sustainability, a clinical excellence reporting core, and a corporate reporting core. And they provide support, and this is the governance behind it, to a set of executive sponsors. These are VPs or EVPs. Anybody can ask for a request, but we go to them and ask them to prioritize what we're going to do. Then we have the ambassador program. And the ambassador program is serving our data champions. And the data champions come in 2 flavors. The individual actor, or we've actually franchised our core model so that other units that want to have cores like us can do so, but we put rules and restrictions about it. So we have 11 different hospitals, and our CEOs sponsor a core to be built in their hospital. They provide the people, and we provide training, data tools, source data, governance, core operations, and access to ambassadors that can help them, guide them through that process. So they're building their own cores, either collectively, or we provide individual training for individual data champions so that they could do more at a local level. Because if you think about this model over here on the left side, we're providing great support for our executives and the leadership, but there's going to be a lot of people that are going to feel like they didn't get what they needed. So by providing the ambassador program, we're empowering other people to empower others. And then finally, this portal that I'm talking to you about is our self-service delivery model, and we provide a search engine that brings together all our dashboards and reports in one view. You don't have to go to PeopleSoft or to Epic or to Tableau to go see what we have. You do the search in our one system, and it'll tell you how to get access to it if you don't have access to it. And if you do have access, you can link right from there and get at it. where to get data sources, data literacy assets, data tools, training, performance improvement module. We have a module that helps them do performance improvement and teaches them where to go get the data that they need so that they can do their project. We have a concept of data groups where different people can huddle around Tableau or Axon or various different tools so that they can learn how to use those and exchange ideas. And then we have a service request mechanism, toolkits and guides so that they can do more on their own. And this is all through a DNA self-service portal that we created. So this is our portfolio. And it's easy for them to understand. And they're not going in all sorts of places to do this. Now they have learned this is where we get support. Here's back to the they don't want to know how the sausage is made concept. Behind the scenes, we have all these capabilities. And we have internally recombined these capabilities to make each of these service pillars functional and effective. So our customer only deals with one of 3 different service pillars, but there is a lot of exciting stuff going on behind the scenes from a technology perspective that makes it happen. And I would say this is a big thing to consider. Am I offering a capability or am I offering a service? And this is a great way to look at it pictorially in terms of differentiating the difference. So finally, like I said, I was going to talk a little bit about the tech. We went through an RFP process. We looked at all the best technologies that we could. We weighed a number of different vendors, and ultimately we landed on just really zeroing in on Tableau from a visualization perspective. We provide analytics support through SAS Viya. We also have ArcGIS for geocoding. And our Analytics Center of Excellence cores leverage these tools and much more, some of the smaller players I'm not talking about, to make sure that we can provide solutions, data solutions for our customers. And then more underneath the hood, we have Snowflake that is providing us our infrastructure for our data platform. We leverage Informatica for governance and ETL and ingestion of our content and cataloging. We also built our own service delivery mechanism, self-service model that leverages all those APIs that Informatica gives us to be able to present that. And these resources are really helping us bring together that stack so that the customer doesn't have to understand how it's happening. They're receiving relief on these issues that they reported to us, but in a way they can consume it. So if there's anything I would love to leave you with is we all know what needs to be done technically. That's not the hard part of it. The hard part of it is how to put it in front of our customers in a way that they can consume it. Because there's nothing more frustrating than spending months and maybe even years putting together these complex data technology solutions only to find out that the customer's not using it and you're wondering why. And my assertion would be, based on my own experience for myself, is the minute that I started thinking more like the customer and how they might want to receive that content and those solutions, I was able to meet them, in a much better place, which is very different from what I used to do. I used to provide capabilities, and they don't want capabilities. They want products and services. So, managing COVID indicators. Who's going to call me out on this? I said I wouldn't talk about COVID again. Sorry, forgot about this slide. So this is one of the challenges that we had. Various teams needed similar data and were receiving asynchronous copies of stuff. Sharing of data solutions and underlying data was needed by various internal and external groups. Our solution, we began with Snowflake, bringing all that together, developed those standard definitions for COVID-19, developed materialized views and data marts so that we can use them in different contexts. And then we shared that data with internal and external groups. And that just changed everything. People were saying, did you get it from DNA? If you weren't getting it from DNA, you didn't trust the data. Use case 2, elevate data literacy. Like I said, we were really trying to support our data champions. And what we've done is set up Data Academy. And now they have access to Snowflake data and Tableau training services. We actually created a Tableau training environment for development and for training, and That is where our learners go to start using our environment and learn how to use it so that when they graduate from that program, they get a certificate, and then they're off and running, and they're out there, hey, look, it's true. We have H&H certified data people now. And one day, our aspiration is that people will say, you got trained at H&H? That's incredible. We have a job for you. So the solution, again, training. We made the data and content available to Snowflake, and our data champions are being trained. They're starting to get trained now, so excited about that. We also have a training program for Epic that's launching in August as well. And then finally, democratization of data. So this has been quite the journey. It's been very interesting how people are somewhat resistant to different ways of doing things, but we really share stuff in Excel all day long, back and forth. And we're now, moving into that world where we're saying, we have one source that you can get to anytime you want. It's always going to be right. You don't have to ask the question on what version is this, when did you get it, what subset of data, what's the universe of this. So we've launched this Core in a Box program, and we're making that data available to those cores at each of the facilities, teaching them how to use Snowflake and how to get access to that data, so that now we're all in the orchestra, performing to the same sheet of music, which may not sound like that exciting for people outside of this room, but for us, we're like, yes, we're finally getting there. So these are the types of things that we've been doing. Obviously, this is a small slice of the story. I'm trying to give you the highlights. I think the big takeaways here are start with your customer, know their pain, make sure you build services before you build capabilities, or design services before you build capabilities. But if you know it from the customer's perspective, everything else follows nicely. If you start the other way, you may build this amazing infrastructure and wonder why everybody's not using it as much as you hope they would. So with that said, I will stop talking and answer any questions.
Thank you. Really loved your presentation. I think at the risk of focusing on a capability, not on the actual customer pain, just curious with this core in the box concept, how do you handle the expense in the billing? So is each core responsible for their Snowflake bill? Or is that covered from, how do you deal with those kinds of things, right? If you're trying to push out, if it's driving expense and managing those things.
So if I understand your question is, so core in a box concept sounds great. But how do we manage that so that we don't end up with multiple Snowflake environments and whatnot?
Yeah, or someone, right, you have a core, you run a huge query, you use up 1,000 Snowflake credits. How are you managing? Are you putting quotas in Snowflake?
So currently we are not. I'm making the argument that first we have to get people doing the right things, and then we can throttle back wherever necessary. So I certainly recognize that if we just let them do whatever they want, they could use a lot of resource. But I think that our bet is if we can get people doing things the right way, we can put more restrictions around utility and stuff later. I think if we put those restrictions up front and didn't really understand how they were going to use things, they might not even use it, which means it would be a non-starter. So very good point. Not sure that, for us at least, we're not focusing on it right away. But it's going to have to get addressed at some point. You're absolutely right. Microphone.
Oh, yeah.
So first, a compliment one data practitioner to another. I think what you've done is fantastic. Yesterday afternoon, I was in this room listening to somebody make a presentation about how to be agile in a data mesh world. And he waxed lyrical about socio-technical approaches, but didn't give me any details. And this was just a fabulous set of guidance and example. I recognize fit for purpose for your health center, but really well thought out. My question then becomes, in your training, a use case, there's no mention of statistical training whatsoever. I assume that's not an oversight. I assume that you don't actually provide that kind of training. Yet for people to use data effectively, they need to understand basic statistics. So have you incorporated statistics into any of that self-paced training, or is that out of scope?
So the question is, have we included statistical training in our training mechanism, which I've not mentioned any of that. So the answer is yes and no. I think that in order to, again, I'm balancing this careful thing between adoption versus doing things the correct way. And what our bet is, if we can just get people engaging with us in a manner that we can become their partners and give them some of what they need, we can get them to do some of what we need. And what we need is for them to evolve. So I love that you brought this point up, because I was just talking to one of my colleagues at work, and we were talking about trying to do this AI pilot and everything. And again, technical people getting all excited about technology, but the reality is I don't feel like our stakeholders are yet sophisticated enough to actually take advantage of that. So to your point, right now, much of the focus is reporting, visualization of data, things like that. But we do want to introduce more of that later, because I think that's going to speak to the evolution of their pathway in each of these stakeholder groups. So I would say that our executive sponsors, our data champions, our data citizens are all undergoing their data journey. And there's a maturity model that each of them can undergo. And what we're doing next, so you all get an insight into what our next step forward is. This is our next big strategic thing. We are going to build a maturity model for each of our stakeholders, where between each maturity layer, we're going to identify different things to do to help that particular stakeholder elevate from this maturity level to the next. But I think while I personally agree that that's really important, I'd rather get them on our journey first, then start introducing those things that are higher maturity level items. Does that make sense? Okay.
Well, thank you for the presentation. This was really great information. I have plenty of questions, but I'll probably stick to one. In terms of the data champions that you just mentioned, are they kind of like your data stewards? And if you could talk a little bit more about, like, are they full-time dedicated to this? Is it a part-time gig that they do? And if it's the latter, then how did you go through that journey?
At the risk of sounding somewhat like an idiot, I'm going to tell you that I have never fully grasped the concept of a data steward. Me personally. I mean, I've read the definitions in Gartner and this and that. It's just certain concepts just are kind of nebulous to me. And that concept's a little nebulous to me. So I'm going to stay away from that term. I will say that the initial intent was to bring people that are data savvy, that are using data most of the time anyway, and empowering them. But some of our facilities are saying, I want to hire a person that's going to know Tableau or this or that. So we welcome both. Either way, whether you're a trained data person, or you're someone that's just interested in data and wants to learn more, or someone that's interested in data and wants to move into a career of data. I think the biggest advantage that we have is if we can empower subject matter expert level people to learn more about data, because that's our biggest struggle internally. Centrally, we have great technical people, but there's just so much to know in healthcare, and it takes time to get that knowledge from our stakeholders, and sometimes that frustrates them, and I understand. And we look at that all the time and say, how could we shorten the cycle to get up to speed with them? Can we hire people and put them in their environment, but have them report to us? Like, we're exploring anything. Like, the one thing I love about our team and our approach and everything is anything's on the table. I mean, we'll talk about the craziest stuff. But I think to your point, with respect to your question on where are these people coming from or where they're at, it runs the gamut. Most of the initial intent was taking people that are already subject matter experts that are working with data and giving them real strength, letting them really flourish. And where they go from there is up to them, up to their institution, but we want to empower them.
Alex, thank you. I'm also from New York, so I hope we can connect after we go back. I have a question about your Core in a Box program.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume when you started it, you already have data repositories, data warehouses kind of built over time. So how do you define the scope for this program? Wow, right? You should already have plenty of data, right? That you want to democratize or like a share in a way that's meeting, right, the data champions or the data users' needs.
Great question. So the question, as I understand it, is how are we rolling out this Core in a Box program with data that already exists, and how are we making it available to them? And is that right?
Yes. So just giving you the NYU. So I work for NYU, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the NYU business is we already have spent over 15 years building the university data warehouse. And so we have been continuously modernize the technology stack, right? So we are moving to Snowflake, you name it, all the different tools. So, but this use case is something that we definitely also, right, want to move towards. So then we do have a lot, like whether it's Oracle database or Snowflake database, it's data. So I'm just curious, how do you start this program with this mindset? And from what you have, or you just say, let's start fresh. Like it's a completely separate, like say, data container.
Right.
And then we'll build in the design, right, for a purpose.
So I think the answer is it's a combination of both. You're right, we have a lot of data, but it has not been aggregated in a central repository. And I'll tell you, everybody in my organization will say, it's in the data warehouse. Might not even be a data warehouse. But so ultimately, it's not until we introduced Snowflake and Informatica did we build an environment that is what we now call our data platform, which includes a data warehouse. And it's only data available through there that we're providing those cores. So that's been our starting point. And I think this speaks perfectly to why everyone needs their own strategy and has to think through their own approach, because for us, we started by saying, okay, now that we have Snowflake and Informatica and we can create that data catalog and show everything that we have and make our data available, only the stuff that's in there is going to be available because that's curated. We know that we feel comfortable sharing that data. So we go through 6 weeks release cycles where more data gets introduced into the Snowflake environment, and that becomes available to our cores. And that's what we're undergoing now. Now, may they get frustrated and say we want more data faster? Absolutely. I don't know. That's part of our experiment. But I think that we are providing so much more utility than they ever had before that so far it's being well received. But we welcome that frustration, that feedback. We want this, we want that. We listen to that. And again, we always try to dive deeper than the initial complaint. We really want to understand where's the pain coming from, because that tells us much more and really helps us understand how to address the needs. Did I answer your question? Okay, good.
Great presentation, and I share the comments about how valuable it is to get into the specifics. Question I have is, how are you measuring adoption among the 3 different personas, and how do you use that to drive kind of the ongoing evolution of the program?
So we will definitely have to connect after this to show you our site. So the question is, how do we, measure adoption for each of these personas and things? So I would honestly say the first instance of what we put out there was the self-service portal. That's where we started, and that's where we started with data literacy, because we felt we had to set a foundation, an expectation, start moving people towards that platform. The other part then is we moved on to the Analytics Center of Excellence, where we established the 3 cores. And on our self-service portal, we also built a website where we create an intake request system that allows us to capture every request that's coming in. And we make sure that we talk to our executive sponsors or their delegates to get confirmation of what gets approved to do, what gets denied, what gets put on hold, what is active. And on that site, we are fully transparent. We put everything that we've done, everything that we're working on, how long it's taking. We want them to know everything. The worst thing as a technologist that I ever heard in my career was guys got so many people over there. What do you guys do with them? It's so frustrating because it's like this kind of semi-judgment, like, why do you need so many people? But the reality is you do. There's just a lot of different things that are going on. Again, people don't want to know how the sausage is made, but they're going to contest why you need so many sausage makers. So what you need to do is be completely transparent. And again, we look at that data as our way to show that we're adding value. And we actually have quarterly reviews with the executive sponsors, and we say to them, so did this offer value? How did this help you? We want to understand that what we're building for them is actually good. And in some cases, they're like, we're not getting as much adoption. And we ask, is there something we could do better in the visualization? Do we need to market it different? Should we call the marketing department? Because once you start looking at what you're building on a data program as a product or service, you realize that it's not just as simple as building it. You got to get people using it. And then sometimes you got to understand that the way you're presenting it might be offending people and they don't want to talk about it. So there's a lot of, the biggest thing that I learned as becoming a CDO was that data is more about like emotions and psychology than it is about like the actual data and, like actual things that are like tangible. It is such a interesting space when it comes to the psychology of data.
That leaves the way to this question from virtual audience. What advice would you offer to data leaders seeking to implement a culture of safety?
So that is a great question. What would I recommend to data leaders seeking to implement a culture of safety? So that's a tough one because ultimately it starts at the top. And like I said before, I'm absolutely proud of the system I work for, the leaders that I work with, because they care about that. And I think that if I were working someplace else tomorrow, that would be a focus of mine before I took a job with that organization, one. But if I were to go there and realize that it wasn't as like much a culture of safety, I would serve as the biggest advocate as I could in that organization to try to, educate them and make them aware as to why it's so important to have a growth mindset, to let people feel that they can make mistakes. They can't learn, and they won't want to use the data to learn if they think they're going to get in trouble. So I think you just have to be an ultra major advocate for it to happen.
Any other questions from the audience?
Thank you, Alex. This has been a wonderful presentation. I want to circle back to the beginning where you sent out that question about, do you know what your users want? Do you know their requirements? And I humbled myself and said no. And I think that it's a struggle at this point. Stakeholders are suffering exhaustion. They're fatigued from interacting with IT. So I have a two-part question. One, how do we earn a seat back at the table to say, hey, we want to hear your problems yet again? And B, how do we ensure that the folks who are in IT who are at that table are listening with that empathetic tone to listen to the pains, to pick up on those pieces so we get it right and don't have to go full circle yet again?
So I think I could better answer the first part of your question, which is, it was more about being able to going back to get it right, asking the right questions to understand what the pain is. The second one is a little more difficult because I think it speaks to the previous question of your leadership has to be behind it. I think if you're going back and you're saying, hey, I saw this interesting session and I think you should look at this, you're going to have to play a big advocate of it. You're going to have to find the evidence. You're going to have to kind of rally up the groups to understand them that that is a different approach that needs to be taken. If they're not bought in, then they're not really going to support you in that conversation with the stakeholder. But if they're feeling pain, because you could look at them as a customer and say, what is the pain that the IT organization has? And they feel like they're trying to give value, but they don't seem to have that. I think that could serve as a dialogue for saying, well, maybe let's change the game a little bit and approach our customers in a different way. The first question is interesting because, again, it goes back to everyone jumps in at a different point of view. I was kind of lucky that we had very disparate data groups in our system. I think the only group in our system that was really kind of more developed was our population and health group. They did a really nice job of putting stuff together, and I still think they're a really strong group. But outside of that, there's just pockets of data groups everywhere, struggling to kind of put things together. And it was easy for me because I just had greenfield. I was a new guy. But if I were in your situation where you're saying we want to go re-engage, I'd probably re-engage with a friendly. I'd say, hey, you know what? This friendly always wants to work with us. We're telling them we're taking a different approach. You know, we really want to understand what they're going through and ask a lot of questions on why they want that, as opposed to, what do you need? Oh, I need better dashboards. Okay, tell us why. Why are the dashboards that we're giving you not working? Well, they don't give anything actionable. Well, what doesn't make it actionable? Well, it turns out that every time I show this, like the dean doesn't look at it, or whatever, you know, stakeholder. Why won't they look at it? Oh, because what they care about is this. Oh, okay, so now you're starting to hear more. They want to get visibility. Their pain is they don't have visibility with their stakeholder. And it's a weird thing to try to actually listen for pain. I didn't learn that until I worked at Gartner, you know, and most of me was just tech. Like, we got great tech. We're going to build great tech. It's going to be awesome. They're going to love it. No, they're not going to love it. Okay.
Any other questions from the audience? So there's a question from the virtual audience. How did you move the needle from actionable analytics to real actions and outcomes? Maybe some tips in that area.
So I think that once you've, as you alluded to, once you've earned that seat at the table, you can pick up the phone and talk to a doctor or a director or someone and say, what's going on? Like, we heard that this thing is happening. And people talk to you about those different things that are pain points. And then all of a sudden, you and your analytics team, in this case our 3 DNA cores, can actually start huddling and saying, you know what would solve this problem? If we can build them a model of this, and now you're presenting them solutions that are dealing with their pain, as opposed to just responding to, you want another dashboard? You want another report? You want another this? You want another extract? Like, that's not value. That's just short order cook work. And the problem with it is not so much that you're not doing your best, it's that you don't even know if it's aligned to what's the problem. So I think you really want to have that relationship with your business. That's key, having that relationship with your business.
Great. Oh.
Here it comes, the doozy.
You're not leading with empathy by saying that. No, I wanted to congratulate you of everything I've heard thus far at the conference. I think you're the first person that's really gone that extra step. And what is the true pain point than just the assumption and looking at data and trying to throw a solution at that. Because of that, I'm assuming what you've built here is unique to New York. Curious if you have any data on other states and how they approach this and how much better you're probably doing by taking that approach.
So quite honestly, I've just gone on the road with this presentation this spring, and we've been getting a lot of support and like accolades to it. I'm actually hoping to hear people kind of tell us what we could be doing better, but I feel like we've mainly gotten like accolades to it. I think other people are way more advanced in the journey with respect to providing more sophisticated analytics. I also think that it's kind of, I'm sitting in the microcosm of healthcare, which is a little more delayed in technology than other industries. So while I'm very proud of our team, I would also say that, in certain ways, I could imagine that there's other industries that are doing things that are just would be mind-boggling to us. So again, that's why I'm looking at that maturity model. I think my role as a CDO is to empower great people to do great things. And I'm looking at the strategy, and when I looked at this, I thought the strategy here is to align ourselves to the business. And these are the things that we should do to align ourselves there. But I have amazing team members that are executing. And now, when I'm looking at strategy again, it's like what I just disclosed. I want to create those maturity models. So we're looking at finer resolution of data so that we understand how to give more relevant resources to our customer bases and actually segment them even further. And maybe that's a good strategy, maybe it's not, but all the people that I've talked to are mostly in our industry. So I'm more than happy to hear anyone critique and provide us, a different approach. I don't know if that.
Keep just more accolades on my end.
Thank you.
So, Alex, I just dare to give you a suggestion because I spent a lot of time in the data management area myself. And 3 years ago, I got the opportunity to manage both application development and data management. So it really gave me a very different perspective. I'm super excited to hear that here we're talking about data as a product. Because when I go to industry conference for application development, right, it's all about product management. So what I learned and observed, and actually it's helped NYU tremendously now, is not only the analytics reporting, the data team is also playing a very big role to enable application development. So the API, the data services, like by using your same concept, right, data as a platform, that could be something really become the fuel for innovation. So, right, you talk about COVID, right, just very, very small case for NYU. We try very hard, right, to protect the university. So we need to build some small app, for example, contact tracing, right? While the whole city is like, we don't know what to do, we have to save ourselves. So then our little data service portal built on top of the data platform really become the hero because it's enabled super rapid application development with all kinds of data integrated to enable it. That probably can be something your team can look into.
I love it. I think that's a great insight. We too had some application development in our group that to build, like you said, not the contact tracing, but for people to come into the building, use of PPE and stuff. But I do love the idea of how to better integrate that into our data, platform. That hasn't happened yet. They're still serving as independent data structures for that application. But I agree with you. I think that needs to get wrapped in because I think that starts moving into the concept of digital transformation. One thing that I think our institution is doing well too is we have a performance improvement effort around, we have a quality academy that's run through our quality and safety office. And everyone is encouraged to do PI projects every year. So I'm thinking that there's kind of a loop here. You have your technology systems that produce data, and the data can be made available to inform performance improvement efforts, and those performance improvement efforts could lead to changes in people, processes, and technology, and then the data, and you just keep cycling. And if we can shorten that loop, we can be a very lean organization in terms of improvement. So I think what you're saying is right on. I agree with you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Alex. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.